Hello, everyone, and welcome on Facebook Live as well as on Agree or Disagree, the podcast, Spreaker.com, K-E-V-O-L-E, Soundcloud.com, K-E-V-O-L-E, Twitter.com. Twitter, you can follow me on Twitter, K-E-V-O-L-E, add me as a friend on Facebook, Kevin Olenick, as well. You subscribe on YouTube, Kevin Olenick, Instagram, K-E-V-O-L-E, as well. And sorry about that for the technical difficulties here. You know, technology is fantastic, but at times technology can be a bit of a difficulty, hence where we are. But we're talking about entrepreneurship today, and specifically around the idea of government's supportive entrepreneurship. And we're not necessarily talking about the idea of the government necessarily doing, and for those that are watching, listening on the podcast, air quotes, to like handouts to entrepreneurs, but a legitimate support for those that want another way of a source of income that is other than our regular 9 to 5 routine, get up, go to work. Because especially if you're living in cities like bigger cities like Vancouver and Toronto, it is very tough to live with just your one income or two income. You want to find a quote unquote your side hustle. And our guest today has some concerns about that. Just we'll read from his post that he posted yesterday on Facebook. He's Kieron Sweeney. You can find him on KieronSweeney.com. How are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Good. Thank you for your patience as we went through technology. Is it heaven or hell?
It's wonderful. You just got to figure it out.
Yes, exactly.
I'd rather have the pains of setting things up and have the technology than not have it at all. So
that's true. That's very true. We're very fortunate in the sense that we have this opportunity to do this. But I want to read from what you wrote yesterday morning about kind of the spirit of where the provincial and the local government in Vancouver and the Metro Vancouver area is around supportive entrepreneurs, and we'll start from there. I must say that Vancouver and BC politicians overregulate and are masterful at killing a thriving economy. The Republic of BC has no clue how to help its citizens. Instead, it bows to lobby groups who feel threatened by innovative and disruptive businesses. They killed the Airbnb shared economy. They will not allow Uber/Lyft to operate here. Yet the rest of the world embraces the shared economy. This type of limited thinking will have a very negative economic impact. Vancouver citizens pay 50 to 60% of their income to live. They had the option of subsidizing their living costs with Airbnb. That is no longer available if you rent or live in a condo. When it rains in Vancouver, good luck at getting a taxi. The amount of money that goes back into the economy from the shared economy is millions, yet the politicians and the bureaucrats just don't get it. They do not understand the entrepreneurial spirit. They just regulate and fine people. This is not a free enterprise province. Speak up, Vancouver and BC residents. I plan to make some noise at City Hall in Victoria. So Kieron, I'm going to give you the floor. Tell us what you're thinking here. Expand on what you're talking about here. You did get a lot of reaction from this on your Facebook, so tell us a little bit about this.
And I think it's certainly feelings that are shared by a lot of people. So let's set a context here. First of all, this is not just happening in Vancouver. It's happening in a lot of major cities, and governments they're trying to figure out how to balance it. Some cities are balancing it by having a certain amount of Uber, Lyft cars allowed, and still allowing citizens to benefit from Uber and Lyft and not have to pay the hefty taxi fees. So some governments are just looking for a balance, and Vancouver has taken a very hard position. So has Victoria, a very hard position that we're not going to let Uber and Lyft operate here. They said in the election they were going to let them come in, but they failed to approve it so far. Why? Well, my guess is they're being heavily lobbied by the taxi companies. Airbnb is being opposed by the hotel industry, and so what happens? Well, I posted it because the cost of living in Vancouver is very high, and wages are not that great here. We are not on par with Toronto in terms of wages. So people working here are spending 50 to 60% of their income to pay for the cost of living. And that is way too high. You can't even get a mortgage on those ratios. So you have to be 33% of your income going to a mortgage to be approved. So nobody here can actually own unless they're making, a significant amount of money proportionate to their cost of a mortgage. A lot of people are renting. We live in condos. We are just littered with condos in Vancouver, and most people are renting. And when Airbnb came along, it allowed people the opportunity to subsidize their rent, and it was great. So what was happening with that money that renters were bringing in, and even owners? Well, owners were doing it to pay down their mortgages. People were doing it to have an investment property. There was one gentleman that had 28 condos, and he was renting them all out in Airbnb until they stopped him. So now the guy's got 28 condos, and he's got to probably liquidate them. So what's happening? All that money that's coming into the shared economy is going back into the economy. So people are utilizing that money to subsidize their rent or mortgage, which gives them more money to spend on other things. That's gone now. So that's going to have an economic impact. People who visit Vancouver cannot afford to stay in our hotels in the summertime. Between June and September, you're looking at two at the very low, if you can find one, but mainly $300 to $500, $600, $700 a night in Vancouver during the summertime. So it makes it impossible for a lot of tourists to even come here. Tourists were coming in droves because they could get Airbnb rates, $100, $150 a night, easy. Now they're not going to be able to come anymore. So that's going to affect the economy as well. So let's talk about the rideshare program. We have taxis that are owned by people in Vancouver who are limiting the amount of taxis on the road because the rates are higher if you have supply demand. So we don't have enough taxis, and so what's happening is we need other ways to get around. The other thing about Vancouver is the traffic jams here are crazy. This is not a well-planned urban city for traffic. The freeways are on the outskirts of the city, so when you get to downtown, it's just making congestion. Downtown, I walk everywhere, and so what we need here is a better shared economy that's equal and fair to everybody, including the hotel owners, including the taxi drivers. Let's have a certain amount of Airbnb available. Let's have a certain amount of Uber and Lyft cars available. San Diego, LA have scooters everywhere. Motorized scooters. You can just hop on, hop off. You leave a scooter, you pick it up, you leave it somewhere, somebody else gets it. It's all app driven. You can get around very economically in San Diego and LA and in the whole Southern California and San Francisco on these scooters. There's a company called Lime, there's a company called Bird, and another one called Razor. So they're showing up in cities all over the United States. This is the shared economy. This is how we're going to make it work in the future. This is how we're going to reduce pollution. This is how we're going to make it affordable for people to visit our city by having shared accommodation. But no, what does the government do? They don't even ask us. We are citizens. We're paying taxes. We have a vote. They don't even consult us. They just impose a new regulation, a new law, and that is not democratic. That is not democratic.
Well, they did recently, there was a conversation this summer about bringing in Uber, and then they were planning to do another study, my understanding was, on bringing in Uber, and then that it would have a result at the end of next year, which is contrary to their previous promise, which was to try to get Uber in by the end of this year, which is not going to happen.
No, I mean, look, it's a delay tactic. So, there's no reason why we can't have Uber and Lyft here, other than the taxis just don't want it. Now, interesting. I was talking to drivers. Talking about taxi licenses. Taxi licenses were at one time a very good investment. You'd buy a license, and that would give you the right to drive a car. And those licenses were upwards of $1 million. But you could make that back over 10 years and have a nice appreciating asset. Well, guess what? That's gone now. That value has dropped significantly. So the taxi drivers are trying to keep Uber and Lyft out because their asset is gone. Now, most of these licenses are held by very wealthy people. They're not owned by the guy driving the car. Generally, it kind of operates the same way as Uber and Lyft. It's taxi licenses are owned by the operators, and most of the taxi drivers are hired. So they rent the car for the day.
So, let's kind of break this down a little bit in terms of, because this is not only is this really an opportunity for, of course, tourists in Vancouver to come in and enjoy a cheaper Airbnb and a cheaper ride, and the other thing that we haven't mentioned yet, well, one of the things about taxis that is important is there's a lot of taxi companies in Metro Vancouver that will not transport from city to city. So they will not necessarily go from Richmond to Burnaby or Coquitlam to Burnaby or wherever like that and the other side of this, and one of the big concerns about the taxi industry right now is there's a perception that the customer service in the taxi industry, and don't think I'm only speaking in Vancouver specifically, but in really a lot of the bigger cities in Canada anyway, the taxi service and customer service is lacking. Would you agree that perception's out there?
Oh yeah, well there's many stories around that, so it's definitely lacking.
But
look, I'm looking at this from the entrepreneur.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm an entrepreneur,
yeah.
and I absolutely love being an entrepreneur. And look, there's lots of ups and downs and risks that go along with being an entrepreneur. But that's, if you're going to play the game, that's part of the game. But you also have the opportunity to, create a decent income and even over time some decent wealth. So I'm just looking at the person who's not necessarily an entrepreneur, but they have a job and they live in an expensive city, and they take on this part-time entrepreneur opportunity where they can actually rent a room out and make some money, or even rent the entire place out. There are people in Vancouver that are renting out their homes and condos and living with a relative for a while to help pay down that mortgage. And so in your poll today, does the government support the entrepreneur? Yeah, there's lots of great programs to support the entrepreneurs. In my business academy, let's get grants. Wonderful. We get that support, and that's beautiful. We're very grateful for that. But I'm looking at this general citizen who's trying to eke out a living in Vancouver, and this has been taken away from them. So the way it works now with Airbnb in Vancouver, they haven't banned it; they've restricted it. And so if you own your home, you're allowed to rent it out. But that's if you own a home or a townhouse. If you live in a condo, which is operated by a strata, and for those in the States, a strata is the same as an HOA. The strata is most stratas are not allowing Airbnb because they don't want strangers coming in and out of the condo. And you know what? I understand that. I support that. But people are going to be having to liquidate their condos now. And what's that going to do to the value of property? People are going to start selling. They can't afford it. A lot of people bought properties because they could rent them out on Airbnb. So the stratas in the city got together and said, we don't want this. We don't like this. And so why not come up with rules in the strata and ways to make it work for everybody? But no, it's this hard line position that you can't do it. And so if you even if you own a condo, the strata is still going to say no, so you can't do it. And if you don't have a permission from a landlord and a strata, then you're fined $1,000 per occurrence in Vancouver.
I guess there's a couple of questions that I want to dig in there. Why do you think, what is the concern from a Stratus perspective? I mean, I guess there's the obvious one, which is we already mentioned, is they don't want strangers. But what's the deeper issue here with people resistant to the Airbnb idea? Like, what do you really think is going on there? Because I don't know if it's I don't want strangers. I think that that's part of it, but I feel like there's an underlying issue going on here that I think is worth exploring.
Well, I've talked to some members of the strata in the building I live in, and their primary concern is we don't know who these people are. They come, they go, they don't have any respect for the property. They make noise, this, that, and the other thing. Well, my building's got about 200 units in it. Now, maybe not that much, 150, but I can tell you there's a lot of people that were doing Airbnb. I never heard one party. I never heard any noise. I never saw any damage anywhere. Because the hosts say to their guests, there's no noise. There's rules. So, like when you have an Airbnb site, there's rules, and you have to follow the rules. Otherwise, you're going to get a negative review, and nobody's going to let you stay at their place, because the whole Airbnb is the host reviews the places a review of the guest, and the guest places a review of the host. So it actually was working really well, and I know a lot of friends that are doing it or were doing it, and it worked great. And there's people coming from overseas that are, say, executives or students or whatever, that are looking for maybe a 30, 60, 90-day accommodation. And you're allowed to do it if it's longer than the 90 days, but it's the short term that's not allowed. So it's too bad. But what I'm upset about is the fact that the government just decided this, and there's no public consultation. It's let's appease the hotel owners, let's appease the taxi drivers, let's appease the stratas, and the hardworking citizens have lost an opportunity. It's too bad.
Well, yeah, I understand that. I feel like maybe part of it is it's. I think that there's your face value. I feel there's something to be said for what you're saying. I think that there's a lot of presumptions around what happens in Airbnb. When I moved here to Kamloops, I was in 5 different Airbnbs until I found a place to live when I moved out here, and every one of them was really fantastic in different ways. No one here was suspicious of me in any way. Everyone was very welcoming. It was a really neat experience, and I'm a big fan of Airbnb. Myself, I think it's a wonderful way to especially if you're in a transition point, it's a great way to do that. Now I have my own place here in Kamloops, but I feel like there is I almost put a different word in with the government. I feel like that in some senses, there's almost a psychological fear of other people being successful. And I understand the idea that some of these people are saying we don't want strangers in our house. But admittedly, there's also the other side of this is a really damn innovative idea of sharing your location, and it's a way to get ahead. And there's a part of us that likes to keep up with the Joneses, and if one of the Joneses is ahead of us, Jones, we get a little persnickety, maybe. What do you think about that?
Well, I mean, that's kind of like their envies, right? So, or they don't. I don't know. I think when the public service mentality, the mindset of a public servant, is very distant from the entrepreneur mindset, and they're all about rules and regulations. They have a job, it's secure, they get benefits, they get ridiculous pensions, and they you know what? I've worked in government. I was in there for 5 years at the beginning of my career. Never again. And I just watched this excessive salaries. Do you know the public service salary base now is higher than the private sector? Like, it's just out of hand. And so now they're imposing regulations on hardworking citizens and doing it without consultation. And so, we have a municipal election coming up, and that's why I said I'm going to make some noise, because I'm going to be really making good communication with the mayoral candidates and the councillors, and I'm going to explain to them why we need to allow this, and do it in a way that there are guidelines. There are guys.
So let's talk
about in your condo and with people are staying there. Then fine, you lose your license, but at least make it so that people can afford to live here, because people are going to leave. And I'm considering going to live somewhere else because I'm tired of it. It's just not. It's not a city where you can thrive. Like, the whole shared economy is creating. I'd like to say billions, but worldwide, I'm probably right. So we're now creating billions. A brand new sub-economy has been created where all that money goes back into the economy. It gets taxed as well. So what's wrong with it? Like it's almost like they're killing their own tax base. I mean, some cities have imposed a tax on Airbnb. So, if a host rents their place out, they've got to pay a tax the same way as hotels. That's fine. So take the tax. But come up with a way for people to do it. But just suddenly banning it, all of a sudden there's like hundreds of Airbnbs gone because as of September 1st, you can't do it anymore in Vancouver or Victoria.
So what kind of strategy are you going to talk to in terms of the mayors and the council? Because that race will heat up quite quickly in Vancouver as the mayor election is in October. What are you hearing in terms of this, and how are you wanting to pivot the conversation a bit?
Well, I'm going to go public forums. I'm going to speak out. I'm going to just say it was a big mistake, and I'll explain everything I've done here. I will put into a nice summary document, and I'll read it, and I'll just make sure that I cover the key points. But I want to get some dialogue going. I want to get their feedback, because I'm looking for a mayoral candidate and councillors that are going to say, you know what, we got to think of everybody here, not just the hotel groups and the lobby groups. It's people. Look, there's so many people. An Uber Lyft driver in the States is making a full-time job is making $1,000 a week. $1,000 a week. $70,000 a year.
Mm-hmm.
Like, isn't that good? Isn't that good? That helps to reduce unemployment. That gives people a bit of freedom. And plus, it's a business. Like, they're operating a business, so they get to, write off part of the car expense, their repairs, their tires, and they can feed their families. And there's so many, what I love about the Airbnb and the Uber? I get into a taxi, and often it smells for various reasons. It's dirty. There's trash on the ground, and it's not well maintained. And some of these guys drive. I've had to tell taxi drivers, please slow down, precious cargo. And then I get into an Uber or a Lyft, and it's absolutely nice and clean. It smells nice. The guy hands me a bottle of water. We have good conversation, and it's a good experience. I go to an Airbnb, and there's nice fluffy towels on the bed, a little bit of soap, and some shampoo, a little bit of chocolate or whatever. Like, people are doing it as if they're running a 5-star hotel, and they're treating people
They
well.
take it seriously.
And they welcome you, they greet you. There's a little, like, the one I stayed in California. I was in California with my daughter, and we stayed at one, and there's a big welcome sign, welcome Kieron, and da-da-da-da, and here's all the Wi-Fi instructions, and here's some suggested places to go eat, and she's got a book of restaurants and things to do in the area. And it's just like people are really putting on a good experience in the Airbnb community. So it's, I'm going to guess is bureaucrats probably don't take advantage of it because they don't travel, and the ones that do get to stay in hotels anyway, but because they get government rates, so they're never going to really experience the Airbnb experience.
Well, even in the spirit of entrepreneurship, I think a lot of that is because you're almost required to rate the Airbnb person, the Uber person, the Lyft person on the app before you go on to your next adventure. And even as guests, you are one that is evaluated as well. So it's the design here is to make sure that the experience is really good. And entrepreneurially, of course, you want higher recommendations, because the higher the recommendation that you get, the easier it is for people to find out who you are. So,
exactly.
There is that incentive there. Where the hotel industry, I haven't had a terrible hotel experience in Vancouver. I was there recently about, 2 or 3 weeks ago with the Anthony Robbins thing. I stayed at a hotel, and it was wonderful where we stayed. I haven't really had a terrible time in the hotel industry, but it's somewhat subconsciously easier because, when you say the Fairmont Vancouver, there's a reputation already, right? Like with Airbnb, if I say Kieron's Airbnb, it's like, well, I better look that up. But, so there's a bit more work and entrepreneurial to it, maybe that helps.
Yeah.
How do you, like you mentioned a little bit earlier, you talked about the idea that you're considering leaving Vancouver, and you're kind of seeing that the city is losing its, I'm not putting words in your mouth, but the way that I'm interpreting what I'm hearing you say is the entrepreneurial feel. How do you feel Vancouver can, not only with the Airbnb, with Uber, Lyft, with the shared economy, how do you feel Vancouver can get that entrepreneurial spirit back?
Well, I'm saying entrepreneurial spirit in the context of the shared economy and allowing people to do the Airbnb and to allow Uber and Lyft to come in here. The entrepreneurial spirit is here. I have a business. All my clients are entrepreneurs. There's lots of people building businesses. So I think the entrepreneurial spirit is there. And, I see people out in the streets, selling stuff. And, even the guy that's playing music on the corner making money, he's an entrepreneur. So,
sure. But in terms of
the spirit's there, but I think what government did is they did not really look into this and consider both sides. So they know we're one of the most expensive cities in the world. They know we have, half the condos here are dark. They're not even being rented because they're owned by foreign investors. And so what do? They're forcing those investors to rent, and maybe the investor doesn't want to rent. They just want to own and buy, hold, and then sell. But now what's happening is they're being forced to pay a 1% tax annually on the value of their condo, of the assessed value. So they're going to start to sell, and that's going to lower the price. So that's going to lower the price of condos. So I don't think they've really considered what's going to happen. So now people can't rent their condos out, so they're going to probably go on the market, and or people are going to have to find some other way of subsidizing their mortgage or their rent. And like the average rent in Vancouver for a 1-bedroom is $2,250. For a 2-bedroom, it's around $3,000. So, it's not a cheap place to live. And, if people are making, $5,000 a month in the service industry, they're lucky. So what does it do? It's going to cause people to do other things to find ways to make money. And that could be anything. But,
I think what I'm trying to say is this, sometimes it's when you see the perception of things like Airbnb and Uber in the shared economy entrepreneurial world. I don't know it concerns me how, in terms of other entrepreneurial projects, the government is truly supportive of. And I think it's really easy to take the shot at the BC NDP right now, but the BC Liberals did nothing about this too. This has been a government issue for a really long time, like longer than I've lived in BC. And I'm not the only one that would speak on behalf of this. I think a lot of people say the BC Liberals fumbled this as well, right? So in terms of the government perception of how to properly, and again, I'm not talking about handouts for entrepreneurs. I mean, there's great that there's grants and stuff, but it's like how they're handling the shared economy as a study speaks to me my concern overall about how they're viewing people that are entrepreneurs.
Well, here's the thing. A bureaucrat, unless they've been an entrepreneur, cannot understand what an entrepreneur is. Now, there are certainly some politicians that have owned businesses, so they would certainly have some understanding of it. But I'm going to say that most bureaucrats do not understand what an entrepreneur is, what an entrepreneur has to do, what they have to, how they don't have pensions, they don't have benefits, and we do have other benefits. We have the benefit of paying lower taxes because we can incorporate and take advantage of that. There's other things we can do. We certainly have some benefits that an employee doesn't have, but that's a choice you make. Every government has always, made statements of how supportive they are of small business and how supportive they are of entrepreneurs. But there's a lot of just words and hyperbole about that. So we would thrive if we invested in if some of the money that's spent on things that are just, I don't even go into it, but if they were invested in entrepreneurs, if every entrepreneur was able to access grants to start their business, it would just make a massive difference to the economy. But it's not available, and very few grant money is available. So if you get 10 or 15 grand in a grant, you're lucky. And
it's a lot of work to get it.
Yeah, and a lot of money the government gives, they do it through, like, if you write some new software code or something like that, you can apply for a grant and get some money back. But that's a long-term process, and you generally need to hire a company that does it on a success fee. But stuff like that is available. But we are in a time right now. We're going into a massive transition. I mean, let's take this a little further. Mm-hmm. 80% of the jobs that are out there today will not be now. They're going to be gone. They're being replaced by technology. Now, there will be other new jobs created, but basically 80% of the jobs that exist today will not exist in 20 years. And this is all from research that's on the internet. You can find it. The other thing is half the population of Canada will not be here in 20 to 30 years.
Right. There's a number of ways that we can take that, but I get what you're saying.
So what's going to happen? If half the population isn't here in 20 to 30 years, what's going to happen?
We will need more people.
Yes, we're going to need more people because the tax base will be diminished. And so here's a country with a massive growing debt that is not being considered in how this is all going to be paid back. And I actually just met with a very well-known economist investor, and he said, governments will never pay the debt back. They don't really care. They don't plan to. So I'm not really sure, because they can't. I mean, the debt in the States is over $20 trillion now, and that's about $60,000 per person in the United States. So how is that ever going to be paid back? So there isn't enough tax revenue to support the ever increasing debt. So 20 to 30 years from now, the generation coming up, Generation Z, is running into a massive problem. And so now we can import people, we can import laborers, we can open up the immigration gates, and that's probably going to be the solution. So, Canada's going to look very different in 20 to 30 years. We do need more skilled labor. So let's stop holding them up. Let's let people in. But, unless there's a massive policy shift in immigration in Canada, and unless there's a massive shift towards entrepreneurs, people are going to have to become entrepreneurs. I say to my kids, you're going to have to probably be an entrepreneur, because, the jobs are going to be gone.
Well, even the industry that we're, even the format that we're using now, we're seeing the changes now. I'm not discounting where the radio industry is, but it is a changing format. It is a changing idea right now, which is requiring more entrepreneurship. It's not necessarily that you have to get a job in the industry, although it's wonderful and stuff. It's great, but you also have to be a little bit of that business person. You have that business savvy. That's one of the things I wish I knew going into this, but those are the things that people are having to learn. I think it's really becoming a lot more important to gain business knowledge, and I'm wondering how that's going in the school system right now. We're coming back to our back to school moment. Are you seeing a change in this in our school system that bringing in a bit more of an idea of entrepreneurship, or what are your thoughts on that, or what are you seeing?
Well, I don't see a lot of it. I mean, in higher education, there are certainly some entrepreneur courses and schools for entrepreneurship, and people who are teaching them are, I don't know if they're entrepreneurs. I don't know who's really even teaching them, but look, you want to learn from an entrepreneur, you come to a person like myself and some of my colleagues in the industry, and we're out there with real entrepreneurial experience, and we're able to educate and train people how to become a successful entrepreneur. So, I don't see the school system really being able to do it at the elementary or high school level. Post-secondary, they need to. I think they need to go out and find ways to get entrepreneurs to teach. So, like real entrepreneurs.
Yeah, like the real hands-on learning.
Yeah, but they're not going to pay me my fee. That's the problem.
Yeah, that's exactly, because you're worth a certain amount, and that's a whole other way. And I'm wondering, it's going to be interesting to see how the school system changes over that same 20 or 30 years. I'm going to be curious to follow that as well. To get back quickly to the government before we wrap up here, like in terms of the city of Vancouver, have you seen where is this on the, where is shared economy on the issue right in terms of this mayor election? Have you heard a lot of talk about it? And is there certain people that you're seeing in terms of running in the council/mayor race that you feel can be open to this idea?
Well, I don't think they've announced who's really running yet. I know there's some candidates out there that are planning on it, but the Green Party is trying to launch a massive campaign for the next municipal election. If anything, the Green Party should be pro-shared economy. I don't know what their position is. I do. One of my clients is a Green Party member and a councillor in the city council, so I can find out from her. But I'm waiting for the candidates to be announced, and then I'm going to look at their agendas. But to answer the question, I don't think the shared economy issue is really been put on any political agenda. I got vocal about it because I've just spent 10 days in the States and just realized how big the shared economy is down there versus up here. It's, I mean, you got shared everything down there. So, and I think what's going to happen too, Kevin, is I think what people are going to do is find other ways to get around the regulations.
They're just going to do it.
There is. I mean, I've already got an idea, and I've run it by a couple of investors, and they're like, "Yeah, that could work." So, and that's what entrepreneurs do. They figure out new ways to do things.
There is a rumor, and I'm going to emphasize this. There is a rumor that there is a shared economy type of system in one of the Metro Vancouver cities that is operating already.
Yeah, and so the way that, do you want me to tell you how that works? So it is a form of Uber, and it is running in Richmond, and it is, so if there's an app called Alipay, and Alipay is an app that you pay for goods and services using Alipay, which is based in China, and the currency is the Chinese yuan. And you have to have a bank in China in order to do this. So there are people in Vancouver using Alipay to pay for goods and services that they're buying in Canada. So the money's never even going through Canadian borders, but goods and services are being traded. Interesting. Do you think they're paying tax? Now, this so-called competitor to Uber that's running in that community is only running in that community, and you have to pay on Alipay. So, but I'm not sure the government even knew where. But this is what I'm saying. People are going to find ways to do it. They're going to figure it out. They're going to find ways around it, and that's what happens, because when government doesn't, speak to the people or involve the people, then people are just going to react and do things differently. But my plan is to really get vocal with it, because I think if we had a really good open forum and discussion about the shared economy in Vancouver, then I think people would alter their perspective a bit and see that there is a way to do it that's a balance for everybody.
How do you propose an open forum? I'm just curious what you're thinking there.
Oh, we'd have to ask the government to have a forum on it. You'd have to get a councillor to put forth a proposition to open up a public forum on the shared economy and get insight, invite people to come and speak at open forums.
Well, I think people have done that, but I feel like there's maybe I think for me, what I sense is making sure that this is an election issue and putting this on the table as something that people need to be aware of. Because I don't one of the things that is also a challenge here too is the civic elections are never well voted. They're not. It's the least of the three interesting in terms of people caring who to vote for. The other thing is I think there's a lot of cynicism around who's going to be the mayor of Vancouver, and I think the mess that the city is in right now, I think, is a concern. But I think bringing it up as an election issue and just continuing to have maybe conversations like this is the way to go. Hey, let's bring back make sure shared economy is on your mind and the appropriate questions to ask the people that are running. Is that kind of what you're thinking there, or did I lose you?
Yeah, got a little there.
Go ahead.
I didn't hear the question.
Oh, I lost you. Basically, yeah. Is it kind of how do we make it? I guess basically in a nutshell, what I'm asking is how do you make it an election issue? How do you make sure that these folks?
You have to speak to the candidates.
Yeah.
So my plan is to get a hold of the candidates, talk to them, and ask them what their opinion is, and are they willing to bring this as an issue? So, we have lots of issues. We've got the pipeline issue. We've got the street people. We have one of the worst one of the richest cities in the world. We have one of the worst homeless problems.
Yes.
Right. We have, we know what East Hastings is like. The problems over there with mental illness and prostitution and all of that. And, lovely, lovely, lovely people. I don't know if you, but I love walking through there. It's so entertaining. But, we need to find ways to help. Now, I just noticed they're building actually right downtown, they're building a mobile home, a modular home.
Housing, yes.
You know the parking lot beside the Queen Elizabeth building? That's going to become a modular housing site. So it's very interesting. So that those are some efforts that are being done to help with homeless. And I know that they've built some modular homes in different areas of the city where it's kind of like a bachelor apartment. It's a one room thing, and it's got a place for a bed and a little couch, and then you've got a kitchen and a bathroom. And these are solutions that are coming up. So that's a major issue. What else is going on in Vancouver? The shared economy. To me, that's a major issue because the reason I wanted to get out there and broadcast this, and I'm going to get on some radio shows and I can probably get on the local show, is because I think we need to lobby as citizens to in favor of the shared economy and find a way to do it that works for everybody, works for the private sector, for the hotel industry, for the taxis, works for citizens, works for the stratas, and just let people enjoy making some extra money. Because the funny thing is, if the average Canadian just made an extra $500 to $1,000 a month in income, it would really make a massive difference in their life.
Yep. Yeah, it would. It would. How do you, obviously I don't think you're the only one that's concerned about this. I mean, I see on your Facebook, there's people that would like to help you. If people are listening to this and say, I want to help you out, how can they do that? How do they contact you?
Call me, message me on Facebook, call me. And 778-888-5837. And look, if we can work together and just all you got to do is talk. You got to write, you got to talk, and you just have to communicate to the politicians that are running in the election that we want the shared economy to thrive, but let's do it in a way that if we're going to regulate things, let's regulate it in a positive way for everybody and not ban things. Like when I saw the $1,000 fine, I felt like, well, who are you to say that I can't rent out a room that I own? What? Like that to me, that's just not fair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there anything else we need to touch on before we?
No, I think we're good.
Okay. So find Kieron. He's giving you his number. He's KieronSweeney.com. What else you got going on that you can tell us about?
Well, we got lots going on. I'm working on a film, and we can probably do a show on that closer to launch date, which would be a very interesting topic. And we're building our academy, and we're taking on focusing more on higher ed clients right now. So it's a lot of fun, and it's good. And then I'm actually working on a shared economy project, but I'll let you know within a month. I'll let you know what we're doing. It's a very interesting project.
Cool. Of course, you can follow me on Twitter, KVOLE, Soundcloud.com, KVOLE, Spreaker.com, KEVOLE. Thank you for those that are watched on Facebook Live, and thanks for dealing with the technical issues. Thanks for your patience again, Kieron, as we went through that, and we will talk to you all very soon. Bye for now.
Thanks, Kevin.